close the door.
Close the door,
right?
Close the door.
Hey, close that door, Tonito.
So
I need my
it's
20.
Like people.
She has I don't know, if a notorious, like, something around her that people don't like, but I didn't like her before, and I'll be frank and truthful with it. I didn't like, her. I didn't like a few of her family members. Shoot, I can beef it up with a lot of people. Trust me.
And not to say that he wasn't, but it's almost like I wanted more.
Yeah. She doesn't watch this podcast, so we're good to talk about.
Welcome back, everybody, to another episode of Flipping Tables. What's going on, people? Welcome back to another episode of Flipping Tables. What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of Flipping Tables.
Welcome back to another episode of Flipping Tables. We're excited to have you guys back.
No, it's all right. I mean, everything you can do everything with coffee, right? So I'm good. I'm good. Yeah.
He's ready to go.
He's got his
about to be
boost.
hyped.
Then somebody was, I'm assuming they were playing the shofar, and I was like, what's going on? Like,
What's going on, everybody? Welcome to another episode of Flipping Tables. We are your co-hosts. That's Fern, and I'm Javi. And today we have some special guests. I always say that when we have guests, but you guys are special to us.
Number one fan right here.
Yeah, number one fan.
All day, every day.
Right there. And it's long awaited, I think. So for our guests and our viewers, why don't you introduce yourselves? Let's start with the gentleman.
The gentleman. Well, first and foremost, thank you for having us. Long anticipated wait for this, and I know I'm blessed. Lily's blessed, and we'll dive right into it. I'm Chaka. Go to Lean with these guys. Do a little youth ministry as well as alabanza. And yeah, babe.
I'm Lily. Do you want me to say what I do at church too?
Yeah.
I mean, we go to Elim, obviously, all together. I serve in the translation, and I think that's pretty much it. And then with the youth, with you guys.
Mm-hmm. Well, tell us a little bit about yourselves, your background. I know you shared a little bit about what you do, like your role and stuff like that at church. But just tell us a little bit more about yourself. What do you like to do? What are you about?
Well, Lily and I grew up in church. Basically grew up in church all our lives, and with you guys did ministry together, found each other in church at 13 and 12, and ever since we've been inseparable. So it's been a great ride.
You asked what we do. We like to do. So we have 2 kids, so that's what our life revolves around now. Isaac likes to play soccer.
I do.
And
basketball.
Work with the kids. At least for me, working the kids. That's what I do. And just church,
I know you're a big soccer fan, obviously. You got into basketball recently.
Yeah.
Right. A couple years ago, right?
Yeah, a couple years ago. The knee, the ankles breaking down a little bit, but happy that I found basketball. Huh?
Is that age? Is that age?
Yeah, but I still got a good 6 years.
He's in denial.
No. Well, I am. I used to think that people who had muscle sprains, muscle spasms, muscle pulls was a joke until I started pulling my hammy and my quad at the same time, and now
while getting out of bed.
Yeah,
not even like playing, just like waking up.
I mean, when you have an ab like tear or pull, and my wife hates it because she's self-diagnosed.
Contusions, the little contusions.
Yeah, she's a nurse.
Okay.
But I'm out for apparently 4 weeks, and she tells me to suck it up. So.
Yeah, suck it up. Boy.
But it's been great. Lily loves to run a little bit too, right?
Oh yeah, I do. I forgot about that. I'm doing a half marathon in 2 weeks, so I'm excited.
You ready?
Yeah.
Oof. How long is that?
13.1 miles.
Yeah, it's not for me.
It's fun.
It's
fun until you get to mile 10, and then you're like, why am I doing this? But then you
10.
finish, and then you're like,
Bro, what?
More like
Fun.
three for us. Translation for me and you, 2.5, 3
Yeah.
is like.
I feel like that's so stressful, and it's a long race, and she loves. I'm a sprinter, but I don't know how she got into these long distance running.
Yeah. What are you thinking about when you're running? Like, what is?
well,
Are you like, oh my gosh?
I do like that you say that because, like, even now with the kids, I mean, I did cross country and like track when I was in high school, but I think that now that I have kids, it's kind of like my time, and I wake up and like I have to wake up before everyone wakes up to do it. And when I'm running, like I like to think about like God, like as like cliche as that might sound, like I do think about like all God's blessings, like that I can be running, and like, you know, not everyone can do that and stuff, and just meditate on things while I'm running.
Yeah.
So that's like your devotional time?
Yeah, I guess
That's cool.
you could say it that way.
Nice.
I
That's so
haven't
nice.
really seen it that way, to be honest, but now that you say it that way, it could be, yeah.
Yeah. Everyone has a different way to approach it. For me, it's the long traffic drives
Yeah.
from the house, you know, sitting in traffic on 270. When it turns into a 20-minute drive turns into like a 40-minute drive, you know, take the time
Instead
to.
of getting mad, right? Like
Yeah.
while you're in traffic and you're like,
Cussing someone out in
Yeah.
the middle of it.
Yeah,
like,
I don't get somebody.
stay in your lane.
Never that.
Not anymore.
Never that.
Not anymore.
Never that.
I don't remember that. I don't remember
Should we
those
do a
days.
podcast on your old age?
Yeah.
We should.
We should. And we
I
should
can also
interview.
have
Yeah.
I see those little clips of 15 years ago. How
You don't
terrible
want
it was.
those.
No,
You don't
no,
want
no.
those.
It's a great
It's a
I
good
always tell
testimony.
you.
There you go. It's a good testimony. You know, God changes people.
Yeah. The long waits too.
Well, let's jump into it. Let's dive into it. Where should we start? Where should we start? Where do you guys want to start at?
We can start wherever. I mean, I guess one of the biggest things right now that we're talking about with Lily is how we got here to this point of 34 and 33. Life comes at you fast.
Thanks for telling everyone my age. It's okay. I don't mind.
But no,
Aging is a blessing.
it's part of life.
Yeah.
But I feel young. I still feel like I can kick it with the young cats, and but it's just crazy how life has brought you here. 1 minute you are, you know, the focal point of youth. Your age group is the focal point, and the next you're helping serve back to the youth, and pretty much, well, hopefully soon we'll be able to kind of be able to mentor them in a different season, right? But we just think about how fast time is approaching, especially now with kids, and it's great, but you just got to learn to appreciate life, you know, because it comes at you really quick.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, like I was telling you earlier, like I think we were talking about, you know, a lot of people see where we're at right now, and they don't really see like the process that you go through, just like, you know, spiritually and just in everyday life, you know. Like we worked really hard in our outside life to be where we are, but also we're still working hard in our spiritual life, which has been, if I can be honest, like even more of a struggle than like, you know, Isaac's a very like goal-oriented person. So for him, he'll like set a goal and he'll like reach it, right? And he works hard until he reaches that goal. But in like that spiritual aspect, it's kind of like you can have goals, but at the end of the day, it's like you also have to rely on what is God's will, right?
Yeah.
And I feel like that is like something that God has been working with him specifically, because he's, I don't know, maybe as a man, or I don't know if you can relate, but as a man, it's kind of harder, I guess, to like let go of like that control and allowing God to kind of process you, right? So
I think for me, it's more of, I grew up in the aspect of, if you work for something, you get something in return, right? And if you work hard at something, you expect the reward to be even that much greater, right? And I think with, you know, the spiritual life that I've been having lately, it's made me realize and made me ponder of how I approach not only life, but, you know, all my different relationships. And it was not that long ago when Lily actually popped the question to me where she was like, so do you think God is like your father? And I'm like, no, not really. I don't think God.
well, let me say, like, I didn't just randomly say, hey, do you think God, do you feel like God is your father?
You just popped into the room like,
Right.
"Hey, let me
It's just
interrupt
like,
what you're doing."
you know, like we've been married for almost like, it's going to be 9 years in May, right?
Yeah.
And we've been together for like a whole lifetime. You know, like you said, we met when I was like 12, and like we've grown together. We've been blessed enough to like grow together and, you know, go through like every aspect of growth. But when you like get to this age where you're an adult, like, and you have to raise your own children and you have to see where you want them to go, it's like you start seeing things and you start questioning, like, you're a good person, you work hard and everything, but that's not what's more important. You know, it's like your relationship with God, and like where are you going and where are you leading and where are you as a like head of a house. Like those are important things. And I, not to say that he wasn't, but you know, it's almost like I wanted more, you know? So that's where like the question stemmed from. Like, you know, I started like just reflecting, and I don't know why it just popped into my head one day where I was like, does he even see like God as a father? So
Yeah, and it was crazy because I think maybe a few days or a week before, I was kind of thinking about my relationships of my father figures, so to speak. Right, we have God as our father, right? Then we have my biological father, right? And then my spiritual father in Pastor Nestor. And I started realizing that every single father type relationship that I've had, it's been very weird. It's been a very transactional type of relationship, right? How I got to this point, I don't know. Might have been from my father. My father's great, right? He's a great provider, great person. He's done everything he could with his life, right? That he could to support me and help me through the process of life, through college, through a whole bunch of things. But in that process, sometimes we were speaking with some of our friends. You don't have to be like a deadbeat dad to not be a father, right? You can still be a father, but not be present in as what you need as someone who is not only following the Christ life walk, but also just as a man in general, right? I think one of the biggest things that I realize is for my father, it was more like, hey, you do good at soccer, you do good at this, I'll buy you a video game, or I'll buy you X, Y, and Z. If you score goals, I'll do this, right? And that relationship, due to the times back in the day, working a lot of jobs, I didn't have that bond. So may have manifested from that aspect. And then I look in terms of my spiritual father in Pastor Nestor. And growing up, I had a really close vibe with him, and it was great. But I don't know, there was a sense of we drifted, and I think in life, especially growing up, a big part of growing and understanding how people operate is communicating, right? And I always wanted to keep that relationship the way that I had in my younger years. I could vividly remember of 13, 14, him coming to my birthdays, giving me FIFA or whatever, right? And then it started growing away. I'm not one to suck up to a pastor or to someone. I like things happening organically. So, from time to time we would say hi, but it drifted to the point where kind of after years later, I yearned for that. I'm like, was it because the church grew? Was it because, but I felt like I always held a special place in his heart, but I wanted that close. I do want that because he was someone that I looked up to, still do, right? But it's more like there was no relationship. And that, even though it's not a relationship that it's like, has impacted me in a bigger way than my spiritual and my biological, he's still an important person in my life. And then it all cultivates how I see a father figure, right? To the point where how I see God. And where God was in my life, in my college years and growing up, is I had dreams, I had aspirations that I really said to God, hey, God, these are my dreams. I know that if I am going to church, if I'm doing alabanza, if I'm doing well, I repent and all these things, and I work hard at my craft, I hope that I can get this. So literally all my life I've been working up, and when it did not come, that's the moment of turbulence. That's the moment of, what is faith to me? What is realizing? Because everything that I had done, worked hard for, it happened, right? And now something that I prayed all my life for doesn't happen. The first thing that you're going to do is like start questioning, like, what else is there, right? What else do I have to look forward to? But God has a funny way to kind of show you the importance of why He does certain things, and now I'm starting to realize it, right? Because it's hard, but I still, even to this period in time, I think people, whether they go on podcasts or they're members of church or a certain position at church, they don't like for people to kind of see yourself as a work in progress, but I am, right?
Yeah.
And I think one of the biggest things for me is now learning at 34 how to re-identify a father figure, how to re-identify God, how to re-identify even the way that I look at things. I sometimes in that mentality of hey, this person shouldn't be here because they lack discipline, they lack motivation, they lack all these things, all these maybe leadership qualities that I possess, but there's something there that God has that person in. Why? I don't know, but it's one of those things that through the scripture, and it's really reading the scripture, to be honest with you, that you really start understanding everything, right? You really start understanding all these character figures. So
you bring a lot of good points, because one thing that I noticed you talking about is like the identity of being a son, right? And knowing that you're a son. And I think we talked about this briefly on a couple episodes back, where sometimes when you lose that identity of a son, you tend to lose that intimacy of as well, right? And I think I've said this before, where when I think of my boys, the different ages, all of my kids, sometimes the younger ones, they have the freedom to like come into my room. They don't knock. They just come in, they crawl into the bed and they jump in. And what are we watching, guys? It's like, we were not watching anything. Me and your mom was about to watch a movie, They're like, oh, but I can stay, right? But before you can even answer, they're already tucked. They're pull in the blanket. They're like this deep, and you're like, I guess we're watching something different, right? They're like, yeah, cool, But that's the freedom that they have when you're young. And listening to you tell that part of it really reminds me when Scripture says that we have to make ourselves like children, And Scripture also says, "Allow the children to come to me." You know what I'm saying? And I think that's the thing that we have to kind of emphasize on that part. That sometimes we do have to remember that we are His kids, and we do have to be able to take that freedom to draw close to Him with that freedom, without being like, oh, but what if He doesn't want me there? What if He's too busy? What if He has something else in His mind? But I like that that you're, at least I'm trying to highlight those specific things that I think it's important that we take away from this, that you do have to remember your identity and not forget that part, right, that you're still a child of God. Even in church, we were talking about it when we're doing our forgiveness series, that when you're hurt, like we talked about church hurt, that you don't necessarily just up and go, because it's not a membership that you're paying for, right? You're not just a member at church. You're actually family, and you don't just pick up and leave your stuff behind and walk out, right, when something is not going in your direction. And a lot of stuff that was coming to my mind was, sometimes there's always a favorite in the house, right?
I don't know what you're talking about.
Exactly. But see, this is the thing.
That's what they say.
And the reason why I want to bring that up is because sometimes when there's favorites in the house, you get used to that. But all of a sudden you step into a different environment and you're not treated the same way, you're gonna feel a difference, right? And you're not gonna be the first person that I've had conversations where we're like, oh, I feel like there's not a huge connection with my pastor, right? But I guess the question, all that just to say this, do you sometimes feel like you made a conscious effort to have that relationship, to build that relationship, or do you think she's like, oh, sorry, were you? Yeah. Or do you feel like at times you kind of like stepped away? And I'll say that because for those of you who don't know, this is my brother-in-law, right? Let's say Abby. She doesn't watch this podcast, so we're good to talk about her. Abby, as she got older, she keeps her distance, and every now and then when she really needs me, she'll like, hey, Dad, you have a minute? And we'll have 30, 40, 1 hour conversations, and it's a bunch of catching up. But the little ones, they're on me like white on rice the moment I walk into the house. Right. You know what I'm saying? So there's a huge difference. That's what I'm asking you. Do you feel like perhaps part of it had to do with you not making that conscious effort, or just being distracted yourself, or perhaps it wasn't reciprocated?
I think exactly. I mean, like like Lily was telling me one of these days, and she always says, you have to hear from someone else before it, sticks.
It sinks in and you actually believe it.
And she hates that. But I think it was just a matter of me not learning how to communicate. I think in life, communication is key. And I think sometimes you have these expectations and your mind can play a trick on you all the time, where you're like, but he's not reaching out, or he should reach out. Or a lot of people, I think a lot of people have either had an issue or, with pastor in terms of like, not keeping that bond and relationship, especially the OGs, right? The
Yeah,
people
older
that
ones.
that were there for Redland Middle School, Rockville High School. But I think to all of them, instead of like uprooting or feeling a certain type of way, which I felt as well, it's just tell him. Even to this point, I think I should have a conscious effort to say, this is how I feel, whether it's through this podcast or indirectly,
They're gonna see it.
directly,
They're
if
gonna see it, that's
if
for
he's
sure.
watching, right? But it's a conversation to be had because sometimes you don't have these or sometimes you think you're saying it to someone directly and you're expecting, okay, after this, where do we go from here? And it's just like, no, we're just here to talk about it. Now, what is the next step? How do you want the relationship to look like, right? And I think I learned a lot when I was in my forgiveness era and forgiving everybody and stuff like that. And someone that sometimes gets a bad rep is SM, spiritual mother, that I love very deeply, right? She has I don't know, if a notorious, like something around her that people don't like, but I didn't like her before, and I'll be frank and truthful with it. I didn't like, her. I didn't like a few of her family members. Shoot, I can beef it up with a lot of people. Trust me.
Let's see. So that had nothing to do
Bro.
with the closeness.
Her daughter's like,
She's like, well, hold on,
She
what?
shook it. Oh no, she knew. We had
No, we would get into fights about that.
yeah, homegirl would be in the middle of it. But after communicating and after talking and after me saying, you know what, I'm going to say sorry. I'm going to say X, Y, and Z. And I'm going to try and reach out to get to know her. It changed my perspective of who she is as not only my spiritual mother, but as a person. Because there were parts where I'm like, yo, you didn't tell me this. I can so relate. And the first person in that, forgiveness era that really helped me kind of transition to a more healing and peaceful state right now. Obviously my wife, but her, the last person in the world that I would think, the last person, because I'm like, oh my God, La Pastora is like, she is like, to this day, I still remember she is whack. She's on back in Rockville time. And I love you, by the way, with all due respect. But back in the day, I remember stand up in where was it? The Rockville Christian Church. She would have all of us standing up, and we were all be in the back seat.
I remember.
Yeah, you were too.
yeah.
And I'm like, nah,
He's like, yeah,
get off
he's
me.
like, I was part of this.
I remember that, yeah.
With our hoodies, with our rubber bands in our pants, our hoodlum age and era. And I'm like, get off. And she would annoy the heck out of me so much. But I think in those times, I realized all the good things that she, did. Because, worship is a struggle for me, and I'm in the alabanza. A lot of things that she taught me at an early age, the small little things you can now learn to appreciate. And as being a father and a mother,
Te va a tocar, that's for sure.
Yeah.
I think it was more like the example, right?
Yeah.
And a lot of things that you're touching on is things that I've even thought, like randomly, had thoughts.
He's
about.
like, I'm having
No,
flashbacks.
hold on.
He's like,
Let me
now
get
that
into
I-
it.
He's like, now that I think
Like
about
what?
it,
You want to get on the
I
seat?
go with it.
I'll interview you.
No, like for example, like your relationship with your pastor, right? Sometimes you're like, we've been one of the first families. Like you've seen me grow up. Why are you not calling me for certain positions, or
Right.
Yeah.
And so, but it's one of those things where it's like, well, what if he doesn't know
Right.
what your
It goes
devotional
both
life
ways,
Yeah.
right?
looks like?
Yeah.
He sees you playing the trumpet, or he sees you teaching Sunday school, or he sees you playing the drums. But he doesn't know like you as well as, somebody that talks to you every day. So I think for me, like I realized that when a couple years ago, like I reached out to them and I was like, hey, can I talk to you about a certain situation? And they both came, and, of course he's busy. Like, he has a bunch of people like hitting him up, inviting him to places, whether it's to preach, to birthday party. He has to go probably like the hospital to visit people that are sick. And, so I'm like, and as you get older, you start to realize that, right?
Yeah.
Like, bro, if I'm busy, imagine their schedules too, and trying to meet up and make it work. So they made time, and we sat down, and, they brought down a lot of those walls that I had like kind of built up. Right. And I was like, wow, okay. I know these are people that I can trust.
Yeah.
And they're not going to be guiding me with their emotions or their own intelligence. It's strictly Bible. Like,
Scripture.
this is what the Bible says, And like when you said, like, as you read the Bible more and more, you see how like a bunch of these people moved.
Yeah.
And you're like, they're so dumb. Like, wow, I can't believe they did that.
Again and
you,
again.
You as a king, you did that. Or you as a prophet, you did that. And so then that makes me, look now in this day and age when it's like pastors, or elders, or like that meme we were just talking about, close the door.
Close the door,
right? Like,
close the door.
Hey, close that door.
So it's like, like people that are like, just top level Christians, right? Because they're famous, they got a great following, and then all of a sudden they stumble.
Yeah.
Right. So it's, and that taught, like a couple years ago, like I was like, man, like I'm so glad that I'm not following the man anymore, like because they failed, and now I can stand on my faith and just keep going and not be phased spiritually by what they did and how bad they failed, and and now be like, all right, well, if they did it, then I'm who am I to? I could just do my own thing.
And I feel like people emphasize, because obviously talking about this is a father figure, right? But a lot of people go down that route, right? Where they look at a pastor and they're like, whatever I'm looking at pastor at is how I'm going to feel about, my faith, or how I'm going to resemble my faith and things of that nature. And they have their flaws and things of that nature. But the moment, like you said, you start focusing on that is the moment where your faith has just, rerouted you to a different area that you need to be.
And like you see it, bro, like there's people that get close to him. There's like, I watched this, like one of the brothers at church, like every time he finished preaching, he goes up there and grabs his mic. And you can be like, such a sucker.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like,
hand him a tissue.
Yeah.
Now you're gonna check after check.
You're like, hand him a tissue.
And we're gonna tag him.
No, but I'm like, he's serving him in one way. You know what I mean? Like, simple thing of taking the mic from the stage to the back. Like, it's not a big deal, but he does that now. Like, that's his thing.
Right.
And that's just how he approached it. And maybe in that time, like he approached it to ask him a question about the sermon, or, but it's on us to draw close. It's just like how the same relationship with God, right? Like it's on us to draw close to God and not just ask him for things. One thing that I've been learning a lot is like show up to church with expectations.
Yeah. I like that.
Expectations of not just showing up like who's going to sing, what songs are they going to sing, what's the preaching going to be about.
And you start guessing what songs they're going to sing. Oh, I already know who's singing. I already know the
Or you're just waiting for lunch, real talk. Like, what's for lunch today?
So it's one of those things where it's like show up to church with expectations, like that God's going to speak to you, that God's going to, and when you start doing that, man, God's going to start, just blowing you away. Dang, I really needed that. I needed to hear this and all that.
Yeah, I like what you said, because one thing that stands out to me is Jesus said it himself, right? My own translation. He said, I have to stand on my Father's business. Like that's what he at a young age started doing, and to build up on a foundation that is the Word, who is Jesus. To know that that's your foundation instead of standing on your own feelings or your own emotions. That's where things get shaky, when you're based everything on how you feel about what the Scripture says instead of standing on what Scripture is actually telling you on a daily basis, right? Mm-hmm. How to live your life. I feel like sometimes everything's just about emotions. Everything's about how you're feeling that day. And sometimes we get up on the wrong side of the bed and we're like, okay, well, I'll go to church. And I saw this reel the other day where the guy was like, telling a joke, I guess he's a comedian or something. He was like, he went to his mom to tell him that he didn't want to go to church, because if he told his dad, he knew he was in trouble. So he told his mom, right? And the mom was like, it's okay if you don't feel like going to church. He's like, what do you mean? I can stay home? She's like, no, you can go to church without wanting to go. he was like, what? I was like, yeah. He's like, you're going to get double the blessing, because going to church when you want to go, that's the easy part. But going when you have no desire to be there, when you do not want to even be within the same room as people, it's like that in itself is a sacrifice. That in itself is everything that you're doing, right? Kind of like goes back to what you were saying, like sometimes we go to church and we show up just because we have to be there, but a veces no es tanto la rutina. It's more of the fact, like, that there's something there for you. That even whether you're going through it or you're not going through it, God has something for you every single time that you show up. And that's what you're saying, to show up with the biggest expectations ever, that he's about to do something for you, through you, or with you. you know, but sometimes we'll only show up with like, okay, what do you have for me?
Yeah.
Maybe he doesn't have anything for you that day. Maybe that day he wants to use you to give to somebody else, you know? And do we show up with open hearts to say, okay, tengo las expectativas that you're going to do something with me today, you know?
Or even like when you're tired, right? Like he was just saying like that joke. It just reminded me what you were saying of her, like stand up, lift your hands, clap, sing.
Yeah.
And it's like, you know, sometimes like I look at the youth now, and because we're on the other side now, I'm like, dang, like I thought about that. Like I said, like I randomly think about it. I'm like, man, like these kids are just sitting there and they're on their phones and their parents aren't telling them. You know, it might be a handful where their parents are like, get up, you know, clap. But most of them are just there, or they get out and they're walking the hall, or they're in the cafeteria. Where it's like before she was the one doing that, you know, doing the rounds. But now it's like it's on us to be those people, be those annoying people like, yo, get up and clap, like get up and sing.
There's only too much the hawk can oversee,
exactly.
right?
And you were trained really well to tell them to do it, you know? So it's like, so now you know, you have a different calling besides just playing a trumpet.
But you know the crazy thing is that once you become a parent, again, cliche, it changes your perspective. Because I see that example of her being like, come on, get up.
And you would want her to do that to your kid.
To my kid, I'm like, yeah, keep going. If you need to have a ruler and, you know, so get Carlos. Emma or Eliza. But it's wonderful to see the transformation between generation and generation of the chains that you had to endure or be captive to versus, you know, Emma. The other day I was seeing her at, what's this guy name? I'm going to get... Forrest Gump. Forrest Frank. Forrest Frank, right? And she was worshiping her hands and the whole thing and stuff like that. Would have preferred a Fenton Mondroy concert, but anyways, not here. But I saw that and I'm like, that's beautiful, you know? I love to see that. And I'm pretty sure there probably is going to be an era where she's not going to want to raise her hands, but for that to be instilled at an early age with love, because I think there's one thing, the very important thing at an early age is how you're going to transmit a certain message to a kid that needs to be so simple, right? Because if you try and make it complex or jumble a lot of words together, it's just going to go through them, right? If you can simplify the love of Jesus, right, in their lives, how to worship, how to pray, they'll start, you know, getting into it a little bit more and hopefully connecting and sticking with you. I know she does an amazing job in prayer. I mean, just this leap with Emma, whose birthday's coming up this Saturday. She's super pumped. But I just can, her prayer, side note, her prayer from 1 year, like, I'm like, yo, her prayer like went like 0 to 100 real quick. And that just goes to show like the work that she's putting in, obviously our bedtime routine, things of that nature. But the point is the fact that we're putting in that time right now and knowing how to convey that information. Because maybe the right information or the right way to say it to me wasn't, come on, get up. More like, hey, you know what? It's probably a good idea of X, Y, and Z, right?
Yeah.
But I don't think at that age and so early in the church, you know, you're bound to miss certain things, right? But I just remember that angered me, right? And it angered me so much. I guess it brought me to a point of, I think it's in Ephesians 6:4, where it talks about,
I said he did have Bible words.
where it talks a little bit about, you know, don't be quick to fathers specifically, don't be quick to anger your kids, right? But instead, lead them in the way of discipline, instruction of your path, right? And so that was something for me, where it's just, I remember being angry by her. I remember being like, get off me, right? But in that, there's a way to, you know, guide them in that direction, right? And sometimes you are going to get angry, right?
And I'll play the other end, right? And you guys are new parents, right? So you guys are pretty soon going to know exactly what I'm talking about when I say this. There's no written book. No one gives you a book on how to do it right and how to get it right the first time. You know, and I think that's the toughest part. And everything that we're discussing, I can see it from a father's point of view, who has a 21-year-old, a 17-year-old, a 11, and a 9-year-old, and I can also see it as from the leadership role of the youth, right? I want to have someone that encourages them, and even more so to have someone that does the work to get to know the youth, to understand what's the best way to talk to each individual. Because some of those youth, like, you don't want to ask them. Some of them you have to like pick them up and drag them, you know?
Right.
Some of them you have to like get loud with. And some of them you just have to be like, hey, come on, let's do it together, and encourage them, which is different, right? And some of them you just say, hey, let's get it. And they do it, you know? So knowing personalities and knowing people plays a huge factor. But there's also phases in everyone's life, and it's going to happen to us in our spiritual aspect, the level of maturity as we mature in Christ. But I see it in my kids, where when my little boys, the younger ones, Tiago and Mateus, when they were little, they would see me praise, and they would put their hands up too, and they close their eyes. Probably wouldn't even know any of the words, of the songs, but they would be praising according to them, right? But you look at them now when they're preteens. Oh, when is this over? Like they don't want to be there anymore, But then I look on stage and I see Daniel, who's, ever since he's been in worship, 16, 17, he's always into it, So it's like there's going to be phases, but Daniel was that little kid who would go over there and be like dancing. And you guys remember all those crazy years, right? But he would dance and he would praise. And then he went into a stage where he was just like, yeah. And now he's back to understanding what it's like to praise and to worship, So there's always phases, and I feel like in our spiritual lives, we're going to have the same thing, where we have seasons where sometimes it's really cold and we don't feel like doing nothing, But then springtime comes around and you feel like you're lit. Summer comes around and you're wanting to do everything. You're excited. You want to go everywhere and do everything. All of a sudden the fall starts to come in, and then all of a sudden another season of winter comes in, and now you feel like you don't go out, you don't do much. And I feel like that's the hardship of Christianity in itself, knowing how to maneuver through the seasons, but always remembering your identity, that your identity is you're still a child, right. And if you learn to take advantage of the different seasons, you learn to find that you can do a lot of fun stuff in the snow, and you can do a lot of fun stuff in the springtime. You're not gonna catch me going to DC taking flowers for pictures and all that stuff, I'm not gonna do that,
Not now.
especially because those allergies be killing me, So that's not my thing. But the reality is that at a certain point, I would go with my wife. She'd make me drive over there for an hour and a half just to do that sort of stuff,
Right.
There's seasons,
and you love it.
You love it,
and I loved it when she forced me.
And you love taking pictures
when she
of
forced
her.
me. I mean, when she asked me to do it,
1,000 pictures of the same one.
She doesn't get it right the first time.
But I think that's the biggest part of it, maneuvering through seasons. Yeah. And I think that's like the biggest challenge that we have as Christians.
Yeah, but I think it's great that you see through the seasons where you can reflect and take a step back and look, hey, did I do this right? Or maybe that person had a point. Or in this time of reflection of what a father means to me, right? Learning to kind of say, all right, let's rewire what your concept of a father is, right? And I pride myself being a good father. I'm going to tell you straight. I'm not going to,
don't sugarcoat it. Say it.
I'm going to say I'm a proud father, love being there for all the things, right? And I see this generation of millennials kind of shifting into that. I was speaking to some friends about that. Our generation is very conscious of spending time with their children, something maybe that was avoided in their lives, right? And so I know it's not just me, but it's one of those things where I can be like, okay, this is what it means to be a father. In the good times where we're going places that they want to be at, Disney World parties, Chuck E. Cheese, Jeepers, wherever it might be, right? I don't think Jeepers exists anymore.
Exists no more.
But especially in the bad times when they're crying before bedtime, or they're just making up a huge storm in the middle of, I don't know, church, and it's some profecia, right, is happening, and you're like, please just chill for a second. But it just goes to show that in these seasons you'll learn to look back and truly appreciate what people have done, the mistakes that you've committed, mistakes that others committed, and be able to say, how am I going to learn? How am I going to grow from this, right? Yeah. And it sucks to say, for me, I'm a big person on time, right? I value time more than anything, right? And And I think that I always look back, I'm like, man, it took me 33 years of my life to kind of realize this concept or to get here. And I'm like, I grew up in the church. I should be past this. I should be at a different spiritual level. But it's those little things that take such a long time to let go, right? Big portion of my life that I've had a beautiful wife to try to talk me in numerous of nights is the way that I feel towards a certain person. Because I'm a very emotional person. Like if I love you, I'm gonna love you like a brother, like anything, right? But if you catch me on the wrong day, it could go for years, and I will not be afraid to kind of let you know publicly and let everybody know that I don't like you. So it's one of those things. Why are you laughing?
Jesus is still working them, guys.
It's still process, right?
It's a work in progress.
Still a process. But for me, it's more that like I truly feel that in this season I'm looking at everything not as like, hey, I have to get to this by this age. I have to do this, because I used to think that way, right? God, in His perfect time, is going to reveal what He has, the promises He has, and hopefully be able to have the power to bring back that time, right? That I think I lost, right? Because again, I look at my life and I'm like, man, if I could have just gone over, if I would have just friended this individual, or I would have squashed this beef, or if I would have just started reading more, or really intentionally reading. It's one thing to read, and it's another thing to actually, like you were saying, with an intention, right? Because now, as parents, we want to make sure that our kids are going to be able to be on the best possible path and position, and to be at a good start where you're not worried about this baggage that your dad or your mom is carrying, or this baggage that they still are working and they haven't gone over, right? It becomes different when you see yourself as a parent, you see your little girl, right, or your little boy, and you just want the best for them. So it's a crazy period that we're in, and hopefully God will continue to reveal great things in our lives, and I know, it's been a storm, and we're not complete, right? Where it's not done, but I know, rainbows follow storms, and it's one of the best ways to kind of think about that. In the midst of turmoil, Noah knew that there was going to be a son, there was going to be land, there was going to be a promise that God had for him, and so hopefully we'll be able to ride this rocky ship, but it's not as rocky as it once was before.
Yeah.
So, and
the importance of knowing that things are always going to get better, because God does have plans. And one thing that you said right now that really stands out to me is you said time is very valuable to you, something that is important. And I think it's always important to also remember that just like you pour in a lot of time and effort into other things in your secular life, that's the same amount of passion and love and willingness that you have to be able to pour into your spiritual life, into your relationship. And that includes your spiritual father's relationship as well, right? I was thinking to myself, and it comes to my mind right now, like, Nestor hasn't even been to my house, my new house, That's exactly what I was gonna say. And I know we invited him a couple of times, but they were out of town and stuff like that. But I was like, right now when you were saying it, I was like, you know what? I haven't invited him to just be like, hey, just come kick it, So that's partially on me as well, And I don't think that we're gonna be the only ones that are gonna be like, hey, we don't have the relationship that we want, that we yearn for. I know a couple of them fairly close to me that feel the same way, right? But it's like, what are you doing? Like if time is important, and that it takes time to build a relationship, it takes contact to build a relationship. I mean, you guys are probably too young for this, right? But I remember paying thousands of dollars on a phone bill because me and Kenya stay up all night long. We remember it.
We just didn't pay for the bill.
Yeah, we just got grounded.
You guys are running everybody else's bills up, But the thing is, like, we used to invest time and money at that point for that relationship. If you asked me back then, I was like, man, what was I doing? That was so dumb. She's paying $1,000. Now I got to help her pay her $1,000. I got to pay my $1,000. And there goes $2,000.
But you were in love. You wanted to get to know each other.
But look, 20 plus years later, like, it was worth the investment, right? So that's where I'm going with it. Like
Right.
sometimes you do have to sacrifice time and money and effort because el que quiere, ¿me entiendes? Y el que no. And so it's like, what is it that, one thing that we started off by saying is that you're a very goal-oriented person. And for me, what I'm taking away is like, am I being goal-oriented in my spiritual life today? Like, am I doing that? Am I setting goals for what I want? Am I coming up with a plan to get there? And what am I doing on a daily basis to actually move that further and to reach my milestones? You know, that's what I'm taking away from this podcast. Because at the end of the day, is like, if I want to get to a certain level and I want to reach those goals, I got to make sure that I'm working my way backwards. And we said this before. You taught me this. I learned this from him. Like, when you're doing your sales, and you're projecting what you want at the end of the year, you got to narrow it down to how many phone calls you're making that day. Am I right?
Yeah.
So sometimes we're going to have to take those same exact steps in our spiritual sense to say, how much time do I got to put in? Am I tithing my time or just my money? Yeah. And am I tithing my time on a daily basis? Am I giving him, that 10% of the 24 hours that he gives me on a daily basis just for him and for me? Because if not, I got to do some life-altering things in life.
And it's crazy that you say that, because another thought that came to my mind is very early on, sometimes it doesn't take a lot. She always tells me that she prides herself in being a good friend, being able to text, communicate with her friends. And I'm a horrible friend, right? I will not text you for days by her standards.
If you're bad, I'm worse.
Because I will leave you on red, but I need it to be on red so it can remind me. But it'll take weeks for me to reply because I'm busy or whatever. But the point is that in that time, I'm thinking to myself, it doesn't take a lot for you to say, hey, hopefully your day is going well. Hey, hopefully everything's going well. Because I think in a relationship, whether it be a father relationship, a marriage, a friend, the devil is great of trying to block communication. And when you block communication, you start going into your mind tricks of hey, maybe this person isn't feeling me the same way I'm vibing with them, or hey, maybe this and this is happening. And I think the fact that if we are able to just spend a little bit of time with God, right? Because I think early on in my years, it's like, if you're not praying 2 hours, you're not in it. If you don't do the real fast and you're doing the Daniel diet, you're not even fasting. If you're not even commit, like if you're, it was very all or nothing. How I thought Christianity was like. So I'm like, man, why should I even pray for like 1 minute, right? It wasn't years later where I'm like, that 1 minute is so valuable, where it's like it can change your whole mood for the day, your whole week, maybe your month, right? But how I grew up was like, either you do it all the way, or you don't, right? And so those little things that you're telling me right now just made me realize it's not a lot that you need, right? It's the simple, like, hey, how are you? When we're going back and forth through our day, a simple, hey, I'm missing you, I love you. If I don't say anything for 2 hours, something's up with, like, she thinks something up, right? Or I'm like, I'm here, I'm alive. You have me on Fine Friends.
To do like things that like what you were saying with the time, right? Like, I told myself this year I was gonna be committed, and I did like a whole vision board where I was like, I'm gonna get closer to God, like read more, like work out more, eat at home more, make food at home. And I've been doing everything except for like being with God. Sometimes like I'll even lay in bed and I'm like, man, I didn't even like pray at all today. Like, I think the kids probably prayed more than I did today. And it's like, like you can be like here and be 33 and still like be there, but not like I'm pride, like I don't take pride in that, but it's like, it's okay. Like, I'm still working on it, and I still try to work on it like every day, but it's so much easier to just do other things. And easy. It's
like we have time to scroll on our phones or play a game.
Or like I wake up at 6 a.m. to run,
I'll give you guys a secret, because today we're focusing so much on seeing God as a father, right? Father as a God. But I'm going to tell you guys, the secret that I found that worked for me is that he is my father, but it's so much more beautiful when your father becomes your friend. And you don't just call him because you need something or because you need to catch up on something that he asked you to do a long time ago, but it's just because you're like, hey, how are you? Let's go watch a soccer game. let's just get together and let's just chill. When you learn that your father is also your friend, I think things change for you.
Yeah.
And I've gotten to the point where I don't need to, and I'll say this carefully, right? I don't have to be on my knees to pray and to have my devotional. You know, my devotional can be in my car. My devotional can be all day long. I've gotten to the point where, and some people might frown on this, right? But like, if I'm getting ready to walk into an appointment, I'll sit there and I'll pray in my car before getting up. And I'll just ask God, give me the grace as I walk in here, help me find him a solution. And even let me know when to shut up. When I've already done my part and I've already did it. If it happens, it happens. If it doesn't, it doesn't. And I'm in sales. Of course, we want that commission, right? But at the end of the day, I've come to a solution in my own head where it's like, I found him a solution, presented what I had to do, and I'm out. You know, and if they get it, they get it. And if they don't, that's okay too. God's going to continue to give me more opportunities and he's going to continue to provide. But I get back to my car and it's like, God, thank you for that. You know, y a veces Dios me da esta palabra, like, to give them in the moment, and I'm like literally
ministering to them.
Yeah, you understand what I'm saying? So it's like it gets to a point where it's a daily basis, and I'm praying every 4 hours, every 2 hours, every 45 minutes. Sometimes it's a hectic day, and you're just getting bombarded with stuff, and in between phone calls, you have to pray. But I've learned that because he's my boy, he's a text away, he's a call away, he's gonna be there. Está pendiente de mí. You know what I'm saying? And I think that's like the biggest thing that I can tell you guys to take away from this today is like, it's not just about seeing him as a father, which is a great thing to have. But when your father becomes your friend, it's a game changer.
Yeah, and I think sometimes we, like knowing your identity, right? Going back to it, like I remember every now and then I see like little clips of this Pastor Anthony Mitchell, I think is his name. And he said, some of you guys think God is mad at you because you messed up on your fast. Mm-hmm. Some of you guys think God is mad at you because you didn't pray today. Right. And when you, like you said, start to rewire the way you see God, the way you think about it, you start to understand, like, you know, is she going to be mad if you didn't have an hour conversation with her today?
Right.
Or was, hey, good morning.
She might.
Right.
He better talk to you.
I'm like this.
Yes, she will. Yes.
No, so it's like, you know, like God sees you that you're trying. God sees that you're sacrificing. God sees that you're putting in work and time and effort. And he's going to bless that, right? He's going to, again, it's not a transactional God, right? But we have to get out of this thought of, I messed up, so he hates me.
Yeah.
Or I messed up, and so the whole day's ruined.
Yeah.
Or saying I worked hard and I earned it.
Right.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? Because sometimes you're feeling like you're the victim, but sometimes you feel like you're deserving of something. And it's like, hold up.
That's good.
And it's one of those things where you gotta learn, like, a no from God too is a good thing.
Yeah.
Like, you know, you're talking about him as a father, and like, what if your little daughters wanted a steak knife to cut their own steak? Or they're like, Dad, I can help you cut down this tree. Give me a chainsaw. Right. No. It's not a bad thing. It's, hey, I'm trying to save you from cutting your arm off.
Yep.
You know what I mean? So, like, realizing that, like, getting to a point where it's like, God, I tried my hardest. I've been praying. I've been fasting. Like, why am I not here?
Right.
Yep.
You know, and him being like, nah, it's not time yet. You know, chill.
And sometimes it's like, for me, in certain aspects, why don't you just be there? Mm-hmm. Just be obedient.
Yeah.
Instead of, because I'm try to reason, logic. No, but this and this before, I'm very necio in certain things.
I'm the opposite.
And I'm just like, why don't you just go? See what happens, see where it takes you, and just stop saying no and stop complaining and just go do it, right? Yeah. And see where that takes you. Like, one thing that has been very powerful for me lately, and I think, I'll be honest with you, you gave me a good inspiration, a good motivation when you specifically said, maybe like 2-3 years ago when you really got into scripture, right? Is sometimes it's like 2 minutes, right? 1 minute. And that's what I've been doing lately. If I can't do it in the beginning of the day, I have to do it at the end of the day, even if it's 30 seconds, even if it's a minute, right? And just see where it takes you. And now there's a thirst of the word for me, because now I'm reading all this. I know people love to go through the Gospels first. I'm going from chronological order, right? Now all these books that I'm reading that are so like repetitive, Adam, Eve, Moses, Joshua, all these, I'm like, yo, there's different, you read them, but sometimes you're skimming like a good chunk.
Yeah.
I would say, for me, I would skim them, and I'm like, yeah, I already know this part. But when you start looking at it, shoot, even Prince of Egypt was like false for me my whole life growing up, you know?
No, bro. Sometimes like pastors
taught me wrong. They
Oh,
taught me wrong.
No, like sometimes pastors come and they'll touch on a chapter that like you just read, and you're like,
You're like,
how'd you get this?
Yeah.
Like, how'd you get this, bro? Like, I got something completely different. But it's like, bro, like the time that's spent, you know, and
Yeah.
and everything like that you put in, you're gonna get back. And you touched on obedience, which is key. You know what I mean? And I think we even talked about obedience a couple episodes ago, and God loves obedience more than sacrifices,
Yep.
right? It's like, God, I messed up, but here's, you know, my Sunday. You know, I'll be at church for 2 hours, but He's like, no, all you have to do is obey.
And that's the crazy thing that I have to rewire, right? Because I'm thinking, if the sacrifice is there, right, that's
Then I'm good.
I'm Gucci, right? I should expect something back. I provided you with my best. I provided. He's like, bro, it wasn't the time. Or, you know, just listen to what I'm saying. Like, I visualize it in a very fatherly way with my
At
kids.
the end of the day, what I tell him is like, it's not what you do, it's all grace, right? Like, you can do whatever, but I mean, at the end of the day, it's just God's grace.
And it's little by little where I guess originally when we were starting this podcast, we were talking a little bit of how God is moving through our different seasons and things of that nature. And it's just talking. I think that's the biggest key that I can take away from the father situations, right? From life in general, whether you want to build a relationship with someone, whether you want to raise kids right? It's communicating how we're going to approach things, how we're going to lay down the plan, right? Because in each season of my life with Lily, I've seen that communication has played a huge role from very early on in our teens to our college years to, you know, as being married and all
I think that like, when I think about like our life together, I feel like, you know, by God's grace, like we've been successful in like a lot of the things that we've done. But I think that where we're at right now as adults with like kids and everything, it's like, at least for me, I'm like, and I was telling my aunt this earlier today, I was like, you can have all these things. Like I became a nurse. That was like my long life, like dream to like be somewhere in the medical field, right? And like I married the only boyfriend I've had. And you know, we've had all these things that like are important, and even then, like where we struggle the most is our spiritual life, right? Yeah. And obviously we're getting there now, and I just think that what I want to say is that you can have everything, but it means nothing, you know, when we're not where we want to be, you know, but we're getting there.
Yeah, and I think when we do our goals, like this year we went to Wyoming to kind of do budgeting and our goals and, you know, what we want for the year. We took some time for ourselves. And the number one thing, probably if you were to tell me like 10 years ago, 7 years ago, 5 years ago, it's like, hey, I want to make this much, or I want to have another house, or I want to have X, Y, and Z. We've been blessed enough to have the things that we have, but now it's really the number one thing is the void that I feel is like, I just want to be spiritually
and it's
at
not
a
that
level.
you didn't have that desire before. It's just kind of like,
It wasn't priority.
it's almost like you said, like you, and I've told him this before too, you know, it's like, I mean, me too, but I think that for him, I'm like, you worked so hard for all these things, and you know, God has blessed you, like he didn't have to, like, especially because you haven't really done your part with like seeking him. Yeah. But then that's where you go back and say, well, it's his grace, you know? So like,
and that's the part where I guess even you saying it right now, it takes me some time to click, right? Yeah. Because maybe I didn't put all the work, like you were mentioning. How much time did I put with God? Yeah, I did the bare minimum to kind of scrape by, or I did the very bare minimum to say I'm a Christian, right? I can put little highlights of the points where I'm like, oh, this was a really good peak year for me as a Christian, or a really great peak moment for me. But then when I realized, are you really consistent? And that's one of the things that I'm very good at in a lot of aspects of life. but in the spiritual sense, and
Literally
I hate
everything else.
and I hate it when people say I'm not
But he's
consistent.
getting better. I mean,
I
like,
am.
I'm happy. I honestly like tell him, and I make a point to like tell him when he's like doing it because they'll motivate him, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
helps.
Yeah, and then before I'm like, how was I so consistent from like very early on to like, 15, 17, 18, and then, or 21, and then all of a sudden it just deteriorated, but it's seasons. We got to get back to it, and that's life, and
And one thing that I think it's important as well is sometimes is to remember and try to remember when that downhill, if you will, began, because sometimes it's like a trauma that gets us stuck in a certain space.
So we know.
And-
We know what it was for him.
and this is the thing, like sometimes it's important to go back to that moment and to learn to let go of that moment,
And like heal from it.
and heal from it. Because sometimes we say, yeah, but okay, I'm over it. Pero decirlo y sentirlo, it's two different things, And sometimes we say it out of como compromiso. And it's just like, let's just check the box because I know it needs to be checked off, but I didn't really complete the task, And I think that's sometimes the hardest part, because if we really don't learn to let go of that part, you're always going to be dragging that behind. Right. And when scripture says, que nos despojemos de todo, and for us to prepare ourselves to run the race that's already been set before us, that means like you have to like take everything off. You're not going to go run your marathon with your gym bag on, and you're going to carry the shoes that you wore, the sandals or whatever it is, and you're not going to run with all that gear on, You're going to get rid of everything. You're going to say, here, Chaka, hold it for me, and I hold my bag. And then you're going to put your little bib on, and then you're going to run, because that's what the race is about, You don't get carry on when you're running a race. And I feel like sometimes we have all that baggage that we're still carrying with us, and it's just bad memories. It's just stuff that hurt us a long time ago. And just because I'll speak for myself, right? Because I'm not the type of person to normally get into my feelings, but it doesn't mean that I don't have feelings. And I consistently will hear people make comments like, "Oh, but nothing hurts Fernando," and it's like, hold on, like
I don't show it.
yeah, just because I don't wear my heart in my sleeve and I don't cry about everything doesn't mean that it doesn't hurt, Right. And sometimes it's important for me to remind myself, like, hey, I still have to be humble before God and say, God, those things were terrible. They hurt, and they still hurt, Help me heal from that stuff. But that's the biggest step that sometimes we need to take, and it's the most difficult step that we have to take as well.
Yeah, and sometimes we repeat, right? We can be at peace, be hurt, heal, forgive, the whole works, and then fall back into that same hurt for whatever reason, right? But just learning to understand it now that you went through it once before and getting yourself out.
And what's the crazy part is, like, sometimes we see it in scripture how the people of Israel used to always fall for the same circle in their lives, right? It was always the same thing. Yeah, they get delivered, they're happy, they're pumped, they praise God, they forget about God, they fall, and then they worship other gods, and all of a sudden someone's taking them over and they're in slavery and captivity. The whole circle begins all over again, And it's like, oh, look at them, they played themselves. But sometimes we don't realize that spiritually speaking, like, we do the same exact thing. And it always goes back to that one day, that 2 days that we were stuck in our feelings, and we're still stuck there. And because we won't let go of that, we tend to fall right back into that again. And then before you know it, you're in a spot where you're like, I'm not happy with where I'm at. And you come to realize that sometimes those emotional feelings that are holding you back, they're setting roots. And you think that you're done with them, but all you're doing is cutting it from the top. You're not really digging them out. You're not really burning the roots. You're not getting rid of them. And that's the tough part. Yeah. That's the biggest part.
Yeah, and hopefully we'll be able to, continue to grow. And I think the biggest thing is to, at this point in our lives, is to really plant that seed to our girls. Yeah. I think I love either Proverbs 22 or 23, where it's just planting the seeds, and hopefully they'll be able to carry out, the good things that you were able to instill in their lives, right? And so, yeah, that's where we're at.
That's awesome. Lily, any final thoughts?
No, I just think that, well, yes, I guess. No, like, it doesn't matter, whether you grew up or in church or didn't, or whether you're like 15 or like 30, like, God can still work,
Amen
and
to that.
we are here, like, married and with children, and God's still doing what he has to, you know, and it's not too late. You just have to be willing to open up your heart and allow him to do what he wants, you know?
That's right.
Yeah.
Mario?
No, nothing. You guys, it's
I
kind
don't know about that. I think Mario has a lot more stuff in his
lot
heart he wants
more,
to get.
but it's for a later
but
day.
We're gonna have to
Yeah, we're gonna have to
part
cut.
2, part 3 of Mario's
He talks
visits.
too
You know,
much.
Too much,
Mario's.
I rap.
No, it was
You
really
already
good.
know.
I thought that there was a lot of good stuff in this, and I know that I truly believe that this is going to be very helpful to a lot of folks. You know, this is not, you guys are not going to be the first people to feel this way. We're definitely not going to be the last people to feel this way. And I know that this is going to be helpful for a lot. I know that I'm taking a lot from this today. I didn't realize how much I need to start investing my time and effort into specific parts of my life, things that I desire, but I'm doing nothing to chase them, you know. And it's important to be goal oriented, not just in our secular lives, but to be goal oriented in a spiritual sense as well.
We appreciate you guys joining us and spending time with us. And for everybody out there, we hope that this is a blessing to you guys, just like it was for Fernando and myself.
Yep.
And we'll just catch y'all on the next one.
Yep.
Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe.
And hit that little bell so you guys get the notifications when we drop new content. That's it.
Because he does.
It's a wrap. I know
all
he
day,
gets
every
it.
day. 3 palms.
I'm like,
3 rivers.
no, it's okay. Just handshake.
He's like, don't let me go. Close the doors. Close the doors.
Close
Close
the door.
door.